Hey, everybody. Welcome into the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague from horns247.com, proud Tampa Catholic graduate, ambassador for all things Florida, the one and only Eric C. Henry. What does the C stand for, Eric C. Henry?
Chip, can we can't give that out here on the air, right? Can we? It's confidential. No, the C is for Charles. My middle name is after my grandfather, so that is what the C stands for.
Okay, now why'd you go with the little underscore there on your? Did someone else have Eric C. Henry?
So, Chip, it's funny you asked that. I created this Twitter account in 2012 or 2013. It was in a media law class, media law or media literacy. I want to say it was media law. I'm actually friends with all the people who were in a group together. We had to create a Twitter account. I created that one and used it as Eric C. Henry. Then I totally forgot the login credentials or whatever that was, because I mean, this is 2012, right? So this is not quite the infancy of Twitter, but it's still kind of new, right? And I wasn't really on it. I just was being a college kid. I didn't feel like I had much to tweet about, and the debauchery that I was getting into. I guess I'm still a little old school. I didn't want that published, so I wasn't going to be tweeting about it. Fast forward 3 years later, Chip, and I got to grad school. I'm obviously went to grad school for journalism, and Twitter was part of the course. It was a public affairs focused grad program, and we needed to be tweeting from City Hall in the great city of Chicago, and that is where I couldn't get back into my Eric C. Henry account, so the underscore was born.
Okay, because the social media coaches say make it as easy to remember as possible.
And Chip, the underscore does no favors. The underscore does no favors.
And now someone else has Eric C. Henry. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, it's just a ghost account because I can't remember the credentials to get in. And then I tried to get it back from Twitter. And I don't know if you've ever had to, or I guess now X, but in the old days, ever tried to correspond with Twitter. It's not like calling up your, 800 hotline and be like, hey, can you help me out? It's just a bunch of back and forth. So that one was dead and gone. And you have the Eric C. Henry underscore, Chip.
Well, there you go, folks. If you were curious, and of course you want to follow Eric on his social media accounts at Eric C. Henry underscore.
Correct.
Because the guy, he's got some good selfies. Now, I'm just saying, the guy's good on the selfies. And if I worked out like Eric, I'd be posting selfies too. You know what I'm saying? Okay, let's get into some Texas Longhorns football discussion. I mean, we know you all love us. You come to the Flagship Podcast for us. Or maybe you just come for the intel that we will share, divulge, expound upon after spending some quality time with Steve Sarkisian, the fourth-year head coach of the now number one Texas Longhorns, and the players. So let's start there. Obviously, the big news was Quinn Ewers leaving the UTSA game after going 14-16. And we kind of touched on this in the Flagship Podcast recap of the UTSA game. So make sure you're getting over to Horns 24/7, the YouTube channel, and like and subscribe, please, to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. That way you get notifications so you never miss an episode. But Quinn Ewers, week to week, but Eric, I'm hearing he's not going to be a full participant in practice this week, probably won't play against ULM. Texas taking on the 2-0 ULM Warhawks. And speaking of the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, Eric and I had a chance to talk to ULM head coach Bryant Vincent. So check out that Flagship Podcast interview that you can find on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcasts. But Arch Manning likely to be the starting quarterback for the Longhorns, Eric. And Jaden Blue, who sat out of the UTSA game with an ankle injury. Jelani McDonald, the sophomore safety, getting heavy rotation at safety, also sat out of the UTSA game with an ankle injury. Steve Sarkisian saying Monday that they are making good progress. I don't know that we'll see them this week. It's possible. No one's, you don't want to be dismissive of ULM, but hell, Texas fans are being dismissive of Mississippi State. They're like, hey, if Quinn needs to rest up, let Arch handle the Warhawks and the Bulldogs. Just have Quinn ready for OU after an off week. OU, of course, October 12th, and then Georgia, October 19th, Eric. Your thoughts on what you heard from Steve Sarkisian and the players on Monday?
Before I dive into the injury report, if you see me drinking this concoction here, it's noted that Steve Sarkisian said Quinn Ewers, if there were an injury report, came out today, it'd be listed as questionable. Jaden Blue, we'll see. Yours truly, not questionable, probable for Saturday, but doing this job, the challenge is to not get sick. And this morning, yours truly woke up a little bit of a head cold. All good. No COVID, no none of that stuff. We're all tested there, but yours truly drinking the concoction to be probable.
Was that Pedialyte?
It's a little bit of Pedialyte, a little bit of emergency. Chip. One of the things that's made Chip Brown a legend in this industry is his ability to stay healthy for many years. And I was told by a source that Chip Brown's father lived to be like into his 90s. And you don't do that and get those kind of genes like Chip Brown if you're getting sick. So you do this job, you're on planes, trains, and automobiles, and you're around people, you got to stay healthy. So that is my disclaimer to folks. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. As to Steve Sarkisian and his team, no, Chip, listen, no disrespect to Brian Vincent. Huge fan of BV, going back to his time, OC at UAB. I think it's a great fit what he has there at ULM, and go check out that interview, wherever you get your podcast, and of course on the Horns 24/7 YouTube page. However, Chip, it's easy, and I don't want to disrespect Jackson State, but that's an FCS team. And last week,
and Deion ain't there anymore.
And ULM's victory over UAB, that's an easy one to get up for fans who may not know. Brian Vincent was, as I mentioned, at UAB for 5 seasons, ended up being the interim coach in 2022, and Bill Clark retired and was passed over for that job by a man with no college head coaching experience in Trent Dilfer. Easy to get your club up for that one, right? Taking on the old team, a bunch of UAB staff. Cool. This is Texas. No reason to be concerned with this game in my mind. And to bring it back to a Chip where you started, I think that leaves room for Quinn Ewers. No need to push him in my mind. No need to push a Jaden Blue. Chip, the younger backs, again, when CJ Baxter went out in the preseason with an injury, that left Texas's backfield with a lot of inexperience in terms of the backs, I should say, a lot of inexperience. Get Jarrett Gibson the reps. Get Quintravian Weisner the reps. Velton Gardner, hopefully he's figured out his way around campus now. Okay, cool. Get him some reps. Get those guys reps. So Chip, I don't think there's any reason to rush those guys back. From everything you've reported, you've done a great job reporting on the Quinn situation, and both of us saw Jaden Blue in essentially street clothes, his jersey and shorts pregame last week. There's no reason to rush those guys back. You get them back, you get a bye week, get everyone healthy for SEC play, keep it moving. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Texas Texas was favored, the opening line, by 45 points. That line has come down to 44.5 points for Texas. And the way Texas is covering point spreads these days, hard to hard to pick against them, even at a 44.5-point line. But Steve Sarkisian, of course, addressed the team going to number one. Georgia barely escaped Lexington, Kentucky with a 1-point win. The AP voters downgraded them, moved the Bulldogs to number 2, elevated Texas to number 1. Steve Sarkisian says, hey, with the college football playoff, 12-team playoff, it doesn't matter. And, back in the day when the voters of the AP poll and the coaches poll decided who was going to be in the national champion, or who was going to be the national champion, if you go far enough back before the BCS, that's one thing. But being number one in the AP poll 3 games into the season means nada. I think the direct quote from Steve Sarkisian was, I think it's good to show what we're capable of, in reference to the number 1 ranking. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to go earn this thing. And the mission is far, far from over. We've got a long way to go, Eric.
Yeah, listen, I was, and not that I expect anything differently, Chip, but I was impressed and pleased with kind of the tone of the players we heard from in terms of the number 1 ranking, because they're cognizant of the fact that they haven't won anything. And the way I kind of speculated in my head, now I'll write this in the 4 Downs column that will be out by the time you're hearing this, probably out by now, but be out on Wednesdays as always, 8:00.
It's a hot one. That 4 Downs column, people are loving it.
I appreciate that, Chip.
Horns247.com.
If this had happened last year, and this is where I'd love to get your perspective on it, maybe I'd have greater concern, right? Because that was a team that had gone 8-5 the year prior, and for all intents and purposes, hadn't really achieved much of anything. So I think last year's club, despite the fact that, yes, you had those veteran presences like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy and Jalen Ford and all those guys, right? Christian Jones. I'd be more concerned and or skeptical of their ability to handle the number 1 ranking if it were 365 days ago. But when you go through what a team went through, coming 1 play away from playing for a national title, Chip, we were there in New Orleans. Part of the reason why I didn't know that Jahdae Barron would be back, you saw the pain in his eyes when we had a chance to talk to him. They lost. Xavier Worthy, X was never the most emotional guy in the world, at least to the media. You saw it. They all wore it on their faces. That shapes you. So for all the guys who are back, and Jake Majors kind of hinted at it, saying, winning's all great, but hey, I was 5-7. Like, this team, in my mind, because of last year, they're even more equipped than just the veteran presence that are remaining, the guys who went 5-7, to handle the number 1 ranking. And as Jake Major said, it's not about being number 1 on September 17th. It's about being number 1 on January 20th, Chip. So I'm just curious if you see it the same way, that especially given, what they went through last year, they're even more equipped to handle, quote unquote, what comes with being with number 1.
I think so. I mean, if Texas had somehow been ranked number 1 last year, it would not have felt right.
Yeah.
And it would have been premature, but it feels right now based on what we're seeing from everyone in the top 10. Michigan served as a barometer game for Texas. We'll see. USC's going into the big house this weekend. If Miller Moss and the Trojans put a beat down on Michigan, who is moving toward Alex Orji at quarterback after Davis Warren threw 3 interceptions last week against Arkansas State, allowing Arkansas State to kind of trim the deficit in that game to 28-18. Then if USC beats down on Michigan, then the Texas win, little luster comes off, and people will look more toward the OU Georgia gauntlet, although Tennessee's going into Norman this week. And if Tennessee goes in and beats down Brent Venables Sooners, then Texas will be seen as probably a touchdown favorite going into the OU game. And we know the craziness of the Cotton Bowl makes that game a little less predictable than just a straight home and away situation. So it'll probably come down to the Georgia game on October 19th. And wouldn't that be something if it was 1 versus 2, which Texas has not been a part of since the 2009 national championship game against Alabama. So all kinds of firsts, all kinds of history changing hands. You and I wrote in our 2 takes column. If you enjoy the Flagship Podcast and, the banter between Florida's finest and, the old Texas reporter, then it's you're going to love the Take 2 column. And we talked about where we were in 2008, the last time Texas was ranked number 1. Eric was taking selfies, and I was trying to figure out how Texas lost a Big 12 tiebreaker to Oklahoma after they beat them 45-35 that season. So a lot of history being changed in the right direction for the Longhorns these days. So, Eric, obviously we need to say Arch Manning's name as many times as possible so that this podcast gets elevated. We need to put Arch Manning in the headline. We need to put Arch Manning everywhere. Maybe the whole caption is just Arch Manning, Arch Manning, Arch Manning. But good God. I mean, what an entrance. The guy throws for a touchdown on his first play and then runs for a 67-yard touchdown that has the whole country talking on the third play. My man Quinn Ewers wasn't even out of the medical tent when those 2 touchdowns were scored, Eric. I mean, we laughed and joked about the ovations that Arch Manning would get in garbage time against Texas Tech. Then Arch Manning said, "Excuse me while I whip this out." And he whipped out 4 touchdown passes and a touchdown run. Your thoughts?
I've this is my 10th year of doing this, professionally getting a check. That was probably one of the most surreal moments. I mean, there are a handful of others, just G5 shenanigans that I can rattle off, but that was one of the more surreal moments I think I've ever experienced, Chip, because you said it. Quinn wasn't even out of the tent, right? Like he had just gone into the tent, and I don't even know how to describe. I can only imagine what that was in the stadium from the seats. I can only imagine what that was like at home watching. The emotional swing. And I know, Chip, we use that phrase in sports a lot, just kind of flippantly, like the emotional swings. Or football's an emotional game, and like it just is. There's no other way to describe it. And seeing your Heisman Trophy, arguably frontrunner, quarterback go down, 3rd-year starter, someone who's earned the respect of this team over the last 3 years. Chip, how often did we talk about Quinn's leadership in fall camp and how much that was raved about, right? And him finally feeling comfortable being that voice, as being his team. And when Quinn went down, it didn't look good. It did not look like what we're dealing with now, which is the week-to-week, almost day-to-day, week-to-week situation. So the emotional swing of that type of player, that caliber of player going down, you flip that with everything, Chip, that you laid out about Arch Manning, and through no fault of his own, just was born into football royalty, and with that comes, some great DNA, which obviously he showed on that touchdown run, which he credited to his mother. But that was just, Chip, one of the more surreal moments I can think of, to go from that to a touchdown pass to, again, Texas gets the ball back, another touchdown, and your quarterback, who again, we can probably have this discussion another time, but Quinn Ewers is one of the better quarterbacks in Texas history and was really, starting to cement himself in terms of where he would be in the history of Texas signal callers. That guy's in the tent, and then the backup 5-star freshman comes in, and there's a huge swing. It's one of those things that, again, I from your vantage point, I don't can only imagine what it was like at home, if in the stands. I can just tell you in the press box, it was something. And we will see. Obviously, again, there's, for all intents and purposes, Steve Sarkisian can say that Quinn Ewers is questionable. I think smart money would be that Arch Manning would be making his first career start this Saturday against UL Monroe. And in all likelihood, he will add on to his performance from last week. But yeah, Chip, it's rare that people like us are lost for words, but I'll tell you that much. Just trying to describe kind of the surreal nature of that moment is something I'll never forget.
Well, and I think it's important to point out, obviously Arch Manning looked fantastic. He led all the highlight shows because, as you pointed out, he's from the first family of football. But Steve Sarkisian, he said it's Quinn Ewers' team. Steve Sarkisian values experience. He values Quinn Ewers having that 19 of 49 passing game in the loss to Oklahoma State on the road in 2022. Arch Manning's never, has he ever taken a snap in a road game? But
no.
Look, that stuff matters. It matters to Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian is uniquely qualified to manage quarterback rooms loaded with NFL talent. He did it at USC with Carson Palmer, Matt Leinart, Matt Castle. He did it at Alabama with Tua and Mac Jones, and then with Mac Jones and Bryce Young. So the experience part of it, Steve Sarkisian is on the record saying, I hate playing first-year quarterbacks. Now, I get it. Arch is in his second year in this offense. He looks awfully comfortable, but he's also the new kid, and defenses don't have any film on him. There's a lot of advantages he has right now. But look, everyone's going to have their own opinion. I think the Texas players, the Texas locker room, more importantly, the message coming from Steve Sarkisian, which has been to be obsessed about the details of winning and also to be obsessed with themselves. Stay focused on what we're doing. Don't listen to the outside noise. I think this team can handle this. And even if Arch Manning goes off again against ULM, Steve Sarkisian's not going to, he's not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe or have some booster tell him, hey, man, you need to get that Manning kid out there. Steve Sarkisian is in full control of the program. He's executing his plan as he said. So other message boards will talk about a controversy and try to pit Quinn and Arch against each other. We know that they've been close buddies, they say, and that they are all about doing whatever they can to help Texas win a national championship. So we'll see how that develops. Obviously, the fact that Texas is the number one team only means that stuff is going to be heightened even more. But in talking to the players, Eric, a couple of things stood out to me. Your guy, Gunnar Helm, Hurdle Helm. That was the play that Quinn Ewers suffered the oblique injury. And then he handed it off one more time and was like, yeah, I need to get out of here. So Gunnar Helm, another big play from Gunnar Helm. And you did not pick him as your most impressive player on offense, even though that hurdle probably helped his NFL draft stock, Eric. Looked pretty athletic. You've been writing about his increased athleticism all offseason. There it is, people. It's why you listen and read Eric C. Henry _, because the man is telling you Gunnar Helms got increased athleticism, and then boom, he's running the high hurdles over the UTSA defense.
Chip, it's funny. First off, I'll address why I didn't take Gunnar Helm. Gunnar showed me a lot last year, in my mind. Maybe not the ability to just turn into, an Olympic hurdler, right? And Gunnar is such a, I don't want to call him reserved, but he is a what you see is what you get with Gunnar Helm. That's real. The put your head down, workman-like mentality, that's real. That's not an act. So when I asked Gunnar the other day, how if he could have made that type of play as a freshman, and I can understand he probably heard the question as why weren't you playing as a freshman, and not like how you've increased your athleticism from then to now. He kind of took like, I can't answer that. I can't really address that. But there's no doubt, Chip, that you're talking about someone who is never going to be confused for JT Sanders, never going to be confused for Amari Niblack. But he's an NFL tight end. I don't see. I know we fall in love with the Kyle Pitts types and others, kind of those hybrids. But Chip, there's always room in my mind for a 6'5", 250-pound big kid. If you look at Gunnar Helm's frame, like, not to say that he's not trying his best with Torrey Becton, and maybe the genes just aren't there for him to look like, a GQ bottle, in terms of the muscles, but there's room for him to put on muscle on his frame and be an NFL tight end. And that just goes to Gunnar Helm's workman-like mentality. Jeff Banks, I asked him what Jeff Banks meant to him, and he talked, at length about what Jeff Banks meant to him and his own dedication. So I'll put a cap on that. I went with Ryan Wingo because, Chip, that dude from day one has looked like a professional receiver. From day one. That is impressive to me. So many freshmen, so many kids get the 5-star label, and Steve Sarkisian is right to kind of say, hey, 5-star talent, right? But it takes him a while to adjust to the college game. Look at JT Sanders. Look at some of the other guys, right? CJ Baxter had to adjust. Ryan Wingo, Chip, looks like a man out there playing a man's game at 18. And that's why I asked Steve Sarkisian how he compares to some of the freshmen who now true freshmen I'm referring to, not redshirt, true freshmen, first-year freshmen, guys like Dwayne Jarrett, guys like, shout out to Tampa, Plant High School, Mike Williams, right? And Steve, while he didn't necessarily compare him to those guys, said that Ryan Wingo, his attitude, his mentality, the way he goes about his business, well beyond his years. So that is why I went with Ryan Wingo, Chip.
And Ryan Wingo has caught all 7 of his targets and has an explosive play in each game this season. Had a 30-yard catch against Colorado State, a 55-yard run on a reverse against Michigan, and the 75-yard touchdown against UTSA. I went with Jarek Gibson. Jarek Gibson. Got to put some stickum on his hands, Eric, because he had a fumble. He lost a fumble against UTSA, but he continues to look like the most grown man going between the tackles, and he is the team's leading rusher. So let's see. Jaden Blue, so good on the perimeter, so good. He was such a big weapon against Michigan in the passing game, which we talked about right here on the Flagship Podcast, that he probably would be more of a threat as a receiver than as a running back. But Jarek Gibson looking good. And Colin Simmons was my most impressive player award through 3 games on defense for Texas. And Colin Simmons, we might need to sit down with PK here in a minute, because my man Trey Moore, God bless him, is falling down the Pro Football Focus rankings, Eric. Right now, Colin Simmons is the highest rated defensive end on the team, followed by Ethan Burke, who is followed by then Trey Moore. So, okay. So Trey Moore is third on that list, but Colin Simmons is number one. And I get it. He's a freshman. You don't want to lift him up too fast, too soon, because let's be honest, the guy is blessed with an explosive first step. I mean, an NFL first round draft pick first step. He gets off the ball so fast that offensive tackles are like, whoa, you are in my lap already. And we asked the players this week, what stands out about Colin Simmons? Alfred Collins, oh, that ball, get off. Baron Sorrell, what stands out about Collins? Oh, that ball, get off. So Colin Simmons, 10 quarterback pressures, 2 sacks. His confidence is growing, Eric.
In regards to Trey Moore, I still think there's a pot of gold at the end of whatever the idiom that I am struggling to
The end of the rainbow.
There we go, Chip. Yeah, I still think there's something there. I mean, you're not that successful. The level of success that Trey Moore had at that level without being a talented player, and Trey Moore's athleticism. I mean, again, Chip. Steve Sarkisian was talking about this guy in May, and like that. That's not a coincidence. Is there an adjustment period to the collegiate game? To the Power 5 level? Sure. Again, I would love to see, against a UTSA, you'd have loved to have seen it. For whatever reason, it didn't happen. Obviously, Colin Simmons had a phenomenal game. I'll come to him in a second. UL Monroe, another great opportunity for Trey Moore to really break out, because this is the type of opponent that he would have success against at UTSA. And one of the things that I note about Trey is he wasn't at UTSA. The Roadrunners, weirdly enough, Chip, have had over the past half decade kind of a measure of, if not NFL guys like a Marcus Davenport or Josiah Tuafa, fringe NFL guys, the players on defense, on the edge defensive line, that at least if you're an opponent, you have to account for, right? It wasn't like you just triple teamed Trey Moore and the rest of the guys were just, guys. So Trey Moore is someone who I think you can't even make the case that, okay, he's getting used to double teams or things of that nature. Like, no, he's faced attention, but also had the help of playing with guys who are talented, similarly to his situation here at Texas, right? So I still think there's something there with Trey Moore. In relation to Colin Simmons, Chip, the numbers don't lie, and I would say your eyes don't lie more than anything else. Pro Football Focus is an inexact science, but your eyes can tell you something to go along with those numbers. And Colin Simmons looks really good. And we'll get into and take it or leave it as far as whether he is this year's Anthony Hill, whether he's a guy who's going to earn himself a spot in quote unquote the starting lineup by mid-year. But I do think every game that we've seen Colin Simmons come in and be a pass rusher, you know it. You know he's on the field. You see it. His explosiveness is one that you instantaneously notice. And this is what I will say, Chip, in relation to Simmons and Moore. And I haven't crunched the numbers, so I'll come back to this next week. Colin Simmons is in on that dedicated NASCAR package, right? I guess for let me not speak in lingo. NASCAR, it's your pass rush package, right? For those who may not know. That does open up more opportunities for sacks, right? And Trey Moore is on that NASCAR package too, but just inherently, when you're in those passing downs that allow you to pin your ears back and go rush the quarterback, that does allow coming in fresh for more of an opportunity, not more of an opportunity, but I guess better success at getting those sacks in a way that if you're more of an every down player that Trey Moore is and has been, kind of not apples to apples. With that being said, two things can be true. Colin Simmons can be playing his behind off and playing really good football, and you probably want to see a little bit more from Trey Moore.
Yeah, because remember, they shuffled the lineup. You had Baron Sorrell and Ethan Burke as the starting defensive ends a year ago. Ethan Burke led the team in sacks with 5.5. and was the highest rated returning run defender. And Burke is by far the best run defender among the defensive ends. And also had a nice pick six there at the end, 30-yard return with a belly flop into the end zone. Eric, you talk to the players and you can feel their confidence. It's almost like they're competing with each other more so than the opponent, because we've heard Michael Taft talk about it. Andrew Makuba, his high school buddy who he trained with under, Bam Baker. And I wrote about it in the Insider last week. Hopefully people will get over to Horns 24/7, take advantage of the 30% off. It's like $6 a month, people. And read that story, because there's a connection between Michael Taft, Jade Barron, and Andrew Makuba that goes back to when they were in high school. And they were very tight-knit then, working with the trainer Bam Blake. Excuse me, I said Bam Baker before. Bam Blake, and a former Colorado State defensive back who's excellent trainer of defensive backs in the Austin area. We talked about how they push each other, and we're seeing it at just about every position, Eric, and that is in credit to Steve Sarkisian. He said he was going to play a lot of guys early against UTSA. 77 players got in the game. 6 guys scored touchdowns. 9 different guys carried the ball. 11 different guys caught a pass. 28 different players were credited with a defensive statistic. So Steve Sarkisian and his coaching staff are doing a good job of developing the guys further down the depth chart, whether they're young guys, transfers, whatever. And I think we need to give a little more love to those interior defensive linemen. Eric, we've talked about Vernon Broughton, probably has played the best of those interior defensive linemen, but Jermaine Lolay's getting reps. Bill Norton, obviously, Alfred Collins, but the run defense is doing its job. They're holding teams under 4 yards a carry. Opponents are averaging about 3.5 yards per carry. You will take that.
Yeah, Chip, we talked about it a ton in the offseason, right? And, we said, hey, if this run defense, we didn't expect them to be third in the nation, again, if they're allowing under 100 yards, or in this case, Chip, in specificity to the stat you just raised, under 4 yards a carry, and the pass defense improved, I think both of us agree that this was a national championship defense. If they did both of those things, and quite frankly, they are playing at that level. And, you can say what you want about the opponents. Obviously, Michigan certainly struggling. I mean, they struggled against Arkansas State, right? So, I guess it got to a 21-3 lead in Arkansas State, put up some points in the fourth. But nevertheless, right, this is not last year's Michigan team. That aside, this defense is playing at a lights-out level. And one of the things that I'm going to highlight during the week is really Steve Sarkisian talked about it, Chip. It was something that made my antennas go up. He talked about PK as a play caller and talked about his ability to mix up the play calls, not kind of fall into a predictable nature, especially on third downs. That is something that goes so under the radar. And I guess I have a tremendous appreciation for it, because we hear so much about offensive play callers, right? And kind of the offensive wonderkinds and the things that they can do. But it's a talent, Chip, to be an excellent defensive play caller. It's the reason why guys like Monty Kiffin and, you can name,
Bill
Belichick, right? That's another one, right? Why those guys had jobs for many years, especially as defensive play callers. That is a skill. PK has been essentially a career defensive coordinator. Someone seems pretty content being a career defensive coordinator. And he is earning every cent of his check. So I just want to kind of take the 10,000-foot view. You talked about the guys on the field. Obviously, Vernon Broughton having an excellent year. AC, we saw him, defeat that triple team, and that was something that was highlighted earlier in the week in team meetings, right? David Benda playing well downhill football, Anthony Hill. But PK, I think, deserves all the credit in the world because, Chip, you're more equipped to talk this than I. I wasn't here, 2021, 2022. This defense, tremendous strides.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendous. I mean, PK was embarrassed. When we finally got to talk to him before the 2022 season, he was embarrassed, and he should have been. One of the worst statistical defenses in Texas football history. Gave up 200 yards rushing per game, gave up more than 5 yards per carry. It was a massive turnaround. Now, part of that was they had to weed out the fence sitters, and they did. They used that first year to figure out the guys who were all in and the guys who were like, nah, I'm going to keep doing it the way the old coach told me. And they weeded them out, and then they got them to play their brand of football. And here are the numbers that should matter, not the number one ranking in the AP poll, but Texas being number 5 in scoring defense, Texas being number 10 in third down defense. I'm talking number 10 nationally, FBS, tied for second in red zone defense. And again, giving up 3.47 yards per carry, that will work. And then, of course, offensively, it's, like a video games, like Tecmo Bowl, number 10 in scoring offense, 46.3 points per game. Eric, we've talked about the red zone offense. It was another good day at the office for the red zone offense. 4 of 5 trips in the red zone, all touchdowns. Most of the touchdowns scored in that 56-7 win came from outside the red zone. 21-yard touchdown pass, 75-yard touchdown pass, 51-yard touchdown pass, 67-yard touchdown run. So the numbers are in a good spot right now. If you had to list your top concern after 3 games, what would it be?
It's kind of a toss-up in my mind. One, I'm not going to say the running game as a whole, because I'm happy with the way the run game has performed, all things considered. This is very trivial. This is very first world problems, and this is probably the sign of a really
crying from a yacht.
Crying from a yacht, right? Would like to see a 100-yard rusher. Would like to see someone just tote the rock, carry the mail, because eventually you're going to run to SEC play. You're going to need someone to just be that guy. And Jaden Blue's more than capable of being that guy. And Jaden Blue probably, for all intents and purposes, would have had 100 yards had he played a ton of snaps in week 1, right? But you just would like to see that crossed off. The other 2, again, very trivial, injuries. It's going to be a long year, Chip, if Texas is going to make it January 20th. And you did a great job talking about the depth. I think it's there, but let's keep knocking on wood that it doesn't get too out of hand. Last but not least, and I hate to pick on one guy because that's not my style. So I'm just going to try to be as well-rounded as possible. Cam Williams is playing good football. When he is blocking, he's playing good football. He is picked up where he left off last year, kind of limited time. Christian Jones led last year, and I tweeted this out, so hopefully I can remember off the top of my head. Christian Jones had the most penalties of any offensive lineman, accepted penalties, I should say, with 8 last year in 14 games. Cam Williams has 5 in 3 games. So you just want to see that toned down. And again, it's not like the kid's jumping on purpose, but you get a certain amount of those false starts, and yeah, some of them happen at the big house, some of them happen at home. You just don't want to see a drive derailed in a big game, Chip, against an OU, against a Georgia, against a whoever, because you can't, get the snap count or hold your water. So that's a very trivial concern. Something that I'm sure Kyle Flood and company are talking about. but you just don't want to, Chip, those things can decide games. You don't want to end up in a first and go from a 1st and 10 to 1st and 15 or a 2nd and 4 to a 2nd and 9 on a crucial drive. So just want to see that tightened up. So those would be 3 things.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. 5 penalties already for Big Cam. All right. Yeah, and I echo those concerns, the depth, the injuries, your stuff you kind of can't control, but you got to have those things go your way. I've said this before. In 2005, when Texas won the national championship, they had 1 starter miss 1 game. Brian Robinson missed 1 game. Otherwise, the starters started every game and finished every game until garbage time. So that stuff matters. It does. And people will be like, well, Ohio State won a national championship with a 3rd string quarterback. Well, that Ohio State team under Urban Meyer and Tom Herman calling the plays had Ezekiel Elliott, had NFL talent all over the place. So that helps too. All right, Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
I am ready, Chip Brown.
All right, then that's what we're going to do next, right here on the Flagship Podcast. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we will roll on into some take it or leave it. Eric?
First one up, Arch Manning, Texas's ever so popular redshirt freshman quarterback, will account for at least 6 touchdowns. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 against Louisiana Monroe. Take it or leave it, Chip.
Man, I got to leave this. Like, surely they're going to have some red zone trips and try to have some rushing touchdowns in this game. I mean, I guess I'm actually thinking about, I'm going to leave it. But I don't feel good about it. I'm kind of reaching for the Tums on it. But yeah, I think there'll be some rushing touchdowns in here. There should be some action for Jarrett Gibson and you would hope Jaden Blue. So I'm going to leave this, Eric. How about you?
Chip, sorry about that. Almost brought that down a little early. I'm going to leave it for a couple of reasons. One, 6 touchdowns is 42 points worth of touchdowns. I think, quite frankly, I don't know if Arch Manning is going to be in the game long enough to get 6 touchdowns. I could see this being a deal where it's like, all right, let's get Trey Owens some work because, quite frankly, we can't afford to lose another quarterback. Also, to your point, which I thought was a good point I was going to make, Arch Manning isn't going to be a red zone threat. I mean, they may call a little RPO action, a little zone read action, but Steve Sarkisian talked about it. He ain't calling red zone runs for Arch Manning, which is going to leave him to have to score from long range. Not that he's not capable of doing so, as he certainly demonstrated a week ago, but I don't know if 6. If you had said 5, I'd have been a little more, inclined to take it, but I am going to leave it, Chip.
Okay. All right, take it or leave it. Number 2, Eric. Jarrett Gibson from your native great state, the Sunshine State of Florida. Jarrett Gibson, a native of Gainesville, will become Texas's first 100-yard rusher of the season against ULM Saturday night. Take it or leave it.
This one I am truly torn on, but I'm going to take it, Chip. I think there will be enough carries that go Jarrett Gibson's way, especially with Jaden Blue being out. And, hey, maybe Steve Sarkisian sending a little message through the media. Jarrett, put a little move on a guy in the open field. I know you want to, run him over. Put a little move.
Baby Rhino, he called him.
I think Jarrett Gibson will hear that message and put a little move on someone in the open field and get, if not a long touchdown run, break a long run. So I am taking this chip.
Yeah, I'm taking it too. I hate that we're agreeing on stuff, but Jarrett Gibson, he's the leading rusher on the team, kind of has been from day one. So no one, he may not be the starter, but he tends to end the games with the most rushing yards. And I do think that as good as ULM's defense has been, and it's been good, they're only giving up 10 points per game against Jackson State, UAB. I think Jarrett Gibson pounds it out, becomes Texas's first 100-yard rusher of the season. Okay. Take it or leave it. Number 3.
Chip says he hates that we're agreeing on things. And listen, I've developed a lead. I'm up 7 to 4.5. That I could just start padding things, but I'm not. It's too early in the year for that. Nevertheless, Colin Simmons will be in the starting lineup by the Oklahoma game. Take it or leave it, Chip.
I'm taking this because even if I'm wrong, I'm right. So Colin Simmons better be in the starting lineup by the OU game. I mean, the kid is from Dallas area, Duncanville. What have we seen from Dallas area kids when they go to the Cotton Bowl? They destroy people. It was Anthony Hill's best game last year. He should not have come off the field. My man Jalen Ford was playing 1,000 snaps in that game, was dog tired, couldn't chase anybody down. Colin Simmons will be ready. I'm taking this, Eric. How about you?
So I'm going to be very particular about the verbiage here. You said starting lineup, and I am going to say that I think Colin Simmons will play starting level snaps. And I will take that because you can't necessarily control whether or not he's in the starting lineup. I don't know that I see Trey Moore losing that job, quote unquote, starting. But could I see a situation where Colin Simmons is playing starter level snaps? Absolutely. And that
I'm telling you, that is a dicey game to play. Because if you keep starting a guy who's not producing like the guy behind him, it can get a little weird. And Steve Sarkisian always talks about rewarding the guys who've put in the work. But I see you. We're going to have to take very careful notes on this one, Mr. 7 to 4.5.
That is certainly true, Chip.
All right. Listen, we appreciate everybody listening to this episode of the Flagship Podcast. Again, please like and subscribe to the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel so that you get all the notifications so you never miss a single episode, because we do sneak in some interviews like we did this week with ULM coach Bryant Vincent. And until next time, we'll see you over at horns247.com. Get in on the 30% off. Cost you $6 a month to hang out with us, hang out with the Eric Henry and myself. Make sure you check out the Take Two column as well over at horns247.com. The Insider comes out Thursday morning. Eric's Four Downs column comes out Wednesday morning. We have Blockbuster, the Stampede, the top end recruiting intel from Hank South and Jordan Scruggs comes out on Monday mornings. You've got the round table every Sunday night where all of the staff at Hornets 24/7 weighs in on the most significant topic of the moment. You know what to do. Go over to horns247.com. We'll see you there. Till next time, stay safe and keep the faith.